Thanks for tuning in to watch our latest webinar from Give a Grad a Go. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to our channel. If you're on YouTube, click the alert notification button, and if you like the video, please click like and share.
So welcome to those who are already online. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our first employer webinar and it is on mental health fitness in the workplace. This is running up to World Mental Health Day, which is on Saturday, the 10th of October. So it's really wonderful that we've got Charlotte Wiseman here, who's the absolute expert in mental fitness, to join us and share all her advice with you. And we're also joined with our CEO, Carrie Curtis, who will be able to give you a slight insight on Give a Grad a Go and engage in some really good discussions with Charlotte. We've got our chat box at the side and also a poll. So if anyone wants to engage, get involved and answer those, that would be great. Message us, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Where are you coming from? Who are you signing in with? Have you got your colleagues joining us? Let us know. We want to hear. Yeah, and I will pass over to Carrie for the first introduction.
Hi, thanks Katie. Welcome everyone. It's great that obviously we've got some representatives here from Give a Grad a Go clients and those that aren't, welcome. Just as a brief introduction, we've been working with Charlotte for, I would say, about 4 or 5 years or so. And we have a very young team that work with us. And so Charlotte's been great in terms of helping those guys get acclimatized to working and helping us put kind of procedures and processes in place to help get the best out of them. So Charlotte, I'll pass this over to you now.
Thank you, Kerry, and thanks everyone for joining. Really nice that you've made the time today. I know it's that time of the day where the email box is overflowing and it can be very easy to put these things off. So we're going to make sure that today is all about you getting loads of tips, loads of tools. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Charlotte Wiseman. I'm an applied positive psychology researcher and a mental fitness trainer. And what that really is essentially someone who comes from a research and evidence base. And I focus on the psychology of workplaces, on how we can, in the workplace, make them health enhancing as well as performance enhancing environments. So that people really want to come to work. And that means that you can attract the best talent and you can keep the best talent and you can really maintain your performance for the long term. So everything we're talking about today, this whole concept of mental fitness, that's what it's all about. How do we optimize the mindset of everybody that we work with so that they can really enjoy their work, engage properly, improve their productivity, and you can boost morale across a company. And that's really what I've been working with Kerry on from right at the start. He was actually, Give a Grad a Go was the first company I started to work with. So really great to have been working for so long and seen such an impact in that sense. So how we're going to run today is I'm going to make it really engaging and practical for you, which means that I'd like you to open the chat function, and when I ask you questions, they're not rhetorical. I'm hoping to get some answers. So please ask questions, comment, give me some feedback, let me know you're out there. I'll be running through some slides to just provoke some thinking. So we'll be using those and we'll be kind of using this as a space to explore. So let's get started. Obviously you've had my introduction. How I came to do this as a career is essentially through my own errors. I didn't look after my mental fitness. I had a series of promotions about 10 years ago and suddenly was catapulted from being a designer in a fashion brand to being the manager of an international design and production team. And now while that was great and I thought it was fantastic, I didn't realize that there was anything I needed to do other than just commit myself to my career, to sort of throw myself into it. And so that's what I did. I continued to look after my physical health. I was very conscious that I needed sleep and food and exercise. I knew that I was loving my career, so I threw myself into my work. I was traveling for about 6 months of the year, usually out in the Far East. So it was quite easy to kind of fall out of habits of staying in touch with people. All of my hobbies and the things that I used to do to take time out were simply just not available, and all the factories were open on a Saturday, so it's quite easy to work 6 days a week. And soon I found I was working 6 days a week, 14 and 16-hour days, And I thought I was coping okay. I thought this was the dream job, and everyone carried on telling me, you know, you've got the dream, you've got the dream. Until one day I walked out of our factory in Indonesia, and I remember being suddenly hit by a pang of thinking, I can't go on. I simply cannot live another day like this. Because I knew that whatever I was experiencing, it wasn't living. There was this sense that I knew something had to change. I knew that I wasn't getting any pleasure out of my days. There was almost like no engagement with what was going on. I was just existing. And I remember desperately wanting to cry and feeling like I didn't even have the energy to cry. And two people from the UK were visiting, and they walked out of the factory, and when they tried to talk to me and I opened my mouth, I couldn't speak. I totally lost the power of speech. They were visiting from the UK, so in all their wisdom, they decided that a pint of beer was going to make this fine. So they whisked me off for a pint, and I sat there and I stared at a drink and just stared silently. And then eventually I was able to cry, and that was, you know, the step one. I was a bit able to engage with those emotions. And then they decided a good night's sleep was going to sort me out, so they took me home. And I was able later that night to call my doctor in the UK and explain what I had understood had gone on. And she was very quick to say, you have to quit your job, you have to come home, and you have to take time out, because that is the standard approach. And I said no. I said no for so many reasons, and I don't think it was as clear as that, but for some reason I said no, and I still think it was the best decision of my life, because that was the only thing that was keeping me going. That was the thing that was giving me the motivation to get out of bed, to keep going. It was giving me a sense of learning, achievement, connection. And so I continued to work through my recovery, and I actually never told my employer until the day I left a few years ago. And what I kind of realized was that for me, that work was actually a fundamental part of my mental health. And that's too often forgotten. We too often demonize the workplace as this source of stress. Actually, it's this source of fulfillment, of growth, of opportunity. It's got so much potential, and we need to reframe that. And that's really what has become my mission, is how can we ensure that we want to be at work, and we realize that this is something that is health enhancing. So as I recovered, I went back, I retrained in psychology to start with. I ended up doing a master's in applied positive psychology, and that kind of brings me to here today, where I train in mental fitness. I also do a mental health first aid and deliver that training, which is a kind of supporting element, and work with organizations to help them complete that vision and complete that vision that I hope to see. Obviously, been working with Kerry, and we've seen the impact there, which is fantastic. So we're going to give you some of the tools that we've been bringing in and we've been using with the team at Give a Grad a Go. But before we dive into that, just to give you a moment to really check in with how you're feeling today, because we can often bound through work, bound through our days, and never stop to say, actually, how am I doing? So I'm going to give you the opportunity to actually check your well-being today. How well, how healthy do you feel today? And there's just going to be a poll coming up on your screen. Just going to invite you to say, how are you feeling? Now, it says on there, really sad, really happy. I'd like you to think a bit wider than that. How are you feeling? You know, you can think about your physical health, your mental health, your social health. If you were just going to give yourself an overall rating, I'd say I'm kind of a 7 or 8 today. Kerry, how are you feeling today if you were going to give yourself a rating? Is that a bit exposing? Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to go between a 3 and a 6. I've got a... elbows hurting, didn't sleep well, and really want this to go away for the weekend.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Katie, how are you feeling?
I'll probably have to go with an 8. I've been looking forward to this webinar for a few weeks now, so I'm quite excited to be on it. We're also looking at some new flats, which is quite exciting, sort of away from work. So that's definitely been a bit of a mood boost this morning. Sorry, Carrie, that you had a horrible night's sleep. I did manage to get my 8 hours, so that's put me in a very good mood. I haven't been drinking very much recently either, so I think that might have impacted things sort of physically and mentally, which is quite good.
Yeah. So we're all kind of getting this rating. I'm going to launch the poll from the audience as well. So this is what we've got from the audience. This is, you've got, most of you are feeling in that 6 to 8 range. Some of you are feeling a bit lower, some a bit higher. The key is with this, it doesn't matter. We're not doing this to sort of judge ourselves or kind of give ourselves any hassle for this. All it is, okay, that's where I'm at. What do I need to do for myself? What is it that I can do right now to look after my mental fitness, to help my mindset? Maybe you need to get off this call at the end of the session and go for a walk. Maybe you just haven't had anything to eat yet and you need to get some sugar. You need to get some food in you, whatever it is. But we just need to be conscious of checking in with ourselves regularly. And that is the foundation of being able to optimize our mental fitness. We need to keep checking in. So now we've done that check-in, let's move into some topics that we can explore. We're just going to start by exploring what mental fitness is, because I know I use that terminology. Some people understand it, some people don't, but we'll explore it a little bit more. We're going to explore some simple ways that it kind of integrates into business context, and then explore why it's so important that we actually use our community to maintain that strength, that mental strength. So what is mental fitness? Well, it used to be believed that there was this kind of one axis of mental health, right? So you had either mental illness, which was down here, or someone would have mental health. And it was kind of assumed that if you don't have an illness, then you're fine. But in 2002, a researcher called Corey Keyes did a huge study and realized that actually there's this second axis. This second axis, which is totally separate to that x-axis. And this is our day-to-day ability to manage the ups and downs of life, to kind of motivate ourselves to get out of bed, to focus and get on with the work we need to do, prioritize, to manage communications and relationships effectively so we're not maybe overreacting or we're not isolating ourselves. All of these things that enable us to have a good quality of life, those are our mental fitness. And those are totally unrelated to whether someone has an illness or not. So while someone initially might have a diagnosis of an illness, and they might find life very difficult and find it hard to come to work, and I don't want to dismiss that some people do need to take time off work when they have an illness, once they've got the right support and treatment and they take ownership of that, they can actually have optimal mental fitness. So even though they've got a diagnosis of bipolar, of anxiety, of depression, they can have optimal mental fitness. They can be your top performing team member. They can be a wonderful partner, parent, husband. All of these things, they're different, they're separate, they're totally separate. And what we find often is that someone who has had an illness actually can increase their mental fitness and end up being mentally fitter than they were prior to that diagnosis. On the flip side, just because someone's never had an illness doesn't mean that circumstances might change and someone might drop down to have very low mental fitness, even though they don't have a diagnosis. And we know that about 1 in 6 people have some symptoms of mental ill health, but they aren't actually diagnosable yet. So those are the early signs that they're on the way. We also know that as someone declines down here into this bottom quadrant, they actually can become so disengaged with life that they're less likely to take action. They're less motivated than someone with depression. So there's 10% of the population that we know are so far down here that actually they're what we call languishing. And that is they're just totally sleepwalking through life. So when we talk about mental fitness, what we're talking about is regardless of whether someone has an illness or not, how can we optimize their mental fitness? And that's really, really crucial that we start to understand this. Really, really fundamental that we all have mental fitness. The other thing is, this is a continuum, which means regardless of where you are on that axis, you can always be doing something to improve your mental fitness. So that's really interesting. What things do you do that you think help you stay mentally fit? I'm going to launch another poll here. What are the things that you think really help you to optimize your mental fitness on a day-to-day basis? So these are some examples. Maybe taking regular breaks through the day. Maybe your exercise routine. For me, that is a fundamental one. Just half an hour of exercise in the morning and I'm a different person. Maybe managing caffeine intake, alcohol intake, meditation. Might be hobbies. You might love to write or to read or to cook. Maybe you've got another outlet. And if you're putting something in that other, I've got loads of people saying other, could you pop in the chat function what those things are for me? I'd love to know what those things you do are. What are those things you do? Listening to music, yeah, writing, thank you. Seeing family and friends, absolutely. We all see the value of that. Take time out away from screens. Goal setting, and hopefully also acknowledging the success of those goals. Yeah, meeting friends, talking to friends, self-development, daily objectives, sense of achievement, listening to music again, walking in the park, getting into the garden, yeah, playing the piano, absolutely, moving away from our screens, being organized, yeah. And we've also got, in addition to that, all of these things that you guys online are also saying. So exercise, fundamental, lots of people saying managing alcohol, taking breaks. Really interesting, since we've been working remotely, the research is showing that most of us are taking fewer breaks. So really important that you explore that. Drop me a message afterwards if you want some tips on how to make the most of even like a 3-minute break. I've got loads of tips on that. Drop me an email. It's just charlotte@charlottewiseman.com. But yeah, loads of simple things that just help us stay mentally fit. Really, really important. The ones that we often underemphasize, sorry about this, Kerry, is sleep. Really, really important. Sleep is fundamental. So if Kerry's a little bit grumpy today, Katie, give him a break. So yeah, obviously he's never grumpy. But really, really important that we need to be aware of things like sleep, things like alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant. Exercise is as good for managing a mild to moderate level of low mental health as certain medications. So really important thinking about these very basic things that help us optimize our mental fitness. The other thing about this idea of mental fitness is that actually when someone is up here, when someone has good mental fitness, what we find is that actually they find challenge and sort of pressure as opportunities to grow stronger. So they find that they kind of get caught in an upward spiral. Once you're up there, every challenge, you kind of push yourself a bit higher and you keep building your resilience. So a way we can explain this is that it's sort of traditionally, we used to think of the concept of resilience as being like an oak tree, okay? So you had strong foundations. And those were all those things we're talking about to keep your mental fitness high, yeah? Those are the foundations that keep you at your best. But let's face it, stuff happens, challenges arise. And if we've only got those strong foundations, then if those challenges arise and we're not flexible, we're still going to fall. So we need to be flexible. And that's why we look at, this image of the palm tree here. The most flexible, the most adaptable, the most resilient tree in nature is the palm tree, of course. So we need to be flexible like a palm tree. The final thing is that what we see in nature is that when trees fall over, they will usually reshoot and reroot. And what that is that through that fall, they have grown stronger. And we as humans do the same. If we can see that every stumble is an opportunity to grow, that's when we actually continue to grow stronger. We continue to maintain that resilience and we can optimize our performance, our mental fitness for the long term. So that's a really fundamental thing you want to think about when you're thinking about supporting your team. How can you help them to not be as scared of these failures? And this is more important right now than ever as we move into this unknown sphere of working, this unknown future. We need people to be capturing that innovation, that creativity, that curiosity about what next. How can we think beyond the limits of how we've always worked and functioned? How can we think about this challenge that we're going through as an opportunity to grow and innovate? And that is really, really key to this idea. So it's through that process of challenge, we actually reach a higher level of functioning. And that is the definition of resilience or post-traumatic growth, as the researchers Joseph and Linley first identified. So let's think about this in the business context. Well, if you're a leader, very often we think that, as we go through a company, we can, we're supposed to have all the answers and we're supposed to teach younger people. Well, actually, we need to keep learning and growing from challenge, regardless of where we are in an organization. And that's very fundamental. So this concept of learning from our errors and failures and challenges is relevant wherever you are. I've just completed a massive study with CEOs who have experienced a major crisis. And what I found from that is that they all spoke about the idea that actually, while a leader might traditionally learn a lot in the first years, when you kind of graduate, you go into a company, give a grad of go, I've got you a space at a new company, you go in, you get loads of training and onboarding and it's all great, you progress and suddenly you're delivering the training and you're expected to have all the answers. And slowly you decline your amount you're learning. But actually, as a leader, you need to be learning more and more and more because you have more responsibility. The impact of every action is having more impact on more people. So really, really important. So how do we do this? Well, we need to start thinking about it. We're going to start thinking, and I'd like you guys at home to think about this. Think about a time you have failed. And Kerry, that looks like the look of, yes, I'm going to bring this to you. While everyone at home is thinking, can I invite you to say a time that you've failed? And with that, not just going to get you to focus on that, what did you learn from that?
I suppose within the business, what we did wrong or have done wrong is it's always like a staffing issue in terms of where there's been some kind of conflict within the business, or there have been people not getting along, which, as you're getting lots of people coming through the business at different stages of their careers, all wanting something slightly different, and then looking at each other slightly enviably about what's happening within the business. It was then trying to please everyone all at the same time made leading the company, or actually everyone else, the other managers within the company, it made their lives unbelievably difficult, trying to make everyone happy all the time, as opposed to really what we should have done, which is just set out, this is actually what it is. These are the ground rules, and this is what this is what we're working towards. You're either in that with us, or this isn't right for you. And just kind of like let it play out a little bit more, rather than just trying to force the fit, I think was probably the biggest mistake that we made.
So force the fit of individuals into something that maybe wasn't right for them, and then the leaders getting drawn out into that firefighting process rather than being able to actually vision.
It cost us an awful lot of time and hair.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone, if you back in the home or wherever you're working from, if you're willing to share in the chat function, it'd be really interesting to hear anyone who can identify a time that they have had a failure or a challenge or something. It's an interesting one, this term failure. There's the idea that actually there's no such thing as failure, there's only feedback. There's another really nice acronym that I've heard, that failure is first attempt in learning. That's what to fail is. I certainly wouldn't say that, it's about failure. It's just perhaps challenging moments or falls or stumbles. So overclaiming furlough. Okay, well, hopefully you've learned something from that, but brilliant. When you don't stop to think and there's a negative impact on the person who worked for you. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for your honesty. Really, really important. Yeah, got to think about the implications, the ripple effect. One of the first lessons that my dad, I remember him teaching me, probably far beyond I actually should have learned it, was just like, you never answer something late at night. You always wait till the next morning, because there's very little that if a decision's made at 8 o'clock at night, it's actually going to impact anything. Wait till the next morning, and then you'll have more time to think about the impact on other people. And it was one of the pieces of wisdom that I still try to adhere to. Hiring someone, yeah, brilliant. So hiring someone who you then had to get rid of, perhaps, yeah, kind of maybe the rush to fill a role. Sometimes we forget about that. From the research I've been doing with the CEOs in my network, the understanding that your values of your employees are aligned with the values of your organization is so fundamental to that being a fit. You know, even more so than perhaps their actual qualifications. It's really about making sure their values and what's meaningful to them is aligned. So really, really important. Assuming the people you work with, that you work with place the same level of value in the things you do. Yeah, absolutely. So lots of things that we see this, you know, we see this thing. Difficulty going from peer to peer, manager to peer, so important. Yeah, really, really difficult. And again, that's something that we find when you've got leadership. If you're any leaders on the call, often when you get to the top, you suddenly go, oh wait, who am I supposed to turn to for that conversation? And that's why a lot of the people I spoke to on my interviews, they got coaches, because actually they said, you know, in my network, suddenly everyone's working, you know, they're under me essentially, and I can't go to those people to draw on research and try to draw on their understanding and experience and learn from them. However, even as a leader, you can say to your team, what can I do better? So again, embody this. If you want to integrate this into your team, and there's a lot around growth mindset, which shows the impact on this on performance, ask your team for feedback. Keep learning. So important. And that's why I love this quote. If you don't look back on yourself a year ago and think how stupid you were, then you can't have learnt much. So I hope that you all look back at yourself a year ago and do think you're a little bit stupid, and think about how much you've learned. You can also think about the last 6 months. What is it that you've learned over the last 6 months about yourself, about your team members? And then how can you actually use that in the months ahead? So be really interesting. Again, I'm going to throw this back to you, Kerry, in terms of, you know, the support we have been giving your team, how that's changed over the next few, you know, over the last few months, and what you plan to do over the months ahead. Kind of what are the things that you're going to plan to do over the months ahead as we kind of navigate the next level of uncertainty and change? What are the things that you're going to do to support your team, having learnt from that over the last few months?
So from our point of view, what we've done, we've actually just completed everyone's end of quarter reviews, or most of them. And within that, we've actually asked everyone, what can we be doing as a business to make your lives better whilst we're still in this remote environment? Brought up some quite interesting things. We didn't realise quite how much people might have been struggling with their laptops, or just with how they're actually sitting day to day. So, you know, we're looking at, and some people's phones haven't been working great because they've got some old phones. That's actually brought up quite a lot of technical issues, which are just kind of, we should have been addressing, just to try and help everyone succeed a little bit, or setting them up to succeed a little bit better. We've actually asked everyone, what could you be doing better in terms of providing services to our clients and our candidates as well? And we've been getting some we've done that for the last couple of quarters, and that's actually brought out things like our webinar series that we've started to do. And that's brought out some really interesting surveys that we're actually sending out to candidates as well. So we've been asking some, I suppose, more personal questions just to see how everyone is feeling. But then actually moving forward, what everyone has shown during these last 6 months is how well they can perform quite autonomously as well. And so giving everyone a bit more freedom in their day-to-days. So within those reviews that we've just done, we've actually got everyone to write their own and to send it back. You know, what's gone really well, what do you think could have gone better, and just listening to what people have actually said and setting their own goals and objectives. That's been quite interesting to do as well, and has actually been much easier to do whilst remote, rather than trying to, I suppose, just generate everyone's end of quarter reviews when you haven't been seeing them every day. But that was actually a really good exercise.
Yeah. So you've actually benefited kind of from that transition. Yeah, I think you've picked up on so many important points there, Kerry, you know, starting with this idea that actually it's those micro annoyances of like the laptop not working, or maybe when you're in an office, you know, people putting empty milk bottles in the fridge. It's those micro annoyances that can really, really build up for people. So sorting those out is fundamental. But as you say, people have been working really effectively and really autonomously very well. And that's the research again shows that we can trust everybody a little bit more than maybe we are inclined to trust. And again, it's very important that we check people are getting the support they need, but we then allow them that space. And I have always admired that openness to getting honest feedback from people in your team. So I think that's something you do very well. And encouraging that honest conversation. So yeah, we've done that right. So yeah, brilliant. Well, I'd be interested, any other thoughts from the community, anyone who's here, any thoughts what you're going to be doing or changing or adapting for over the next few months? Pop that in to the chat function. It'd be interesting to hear. Any other thoughts? I'll give you a moment to do that. Joining BCS as a corporate member, so you're going to make some changes. And thanks, Nicholas. Yeah, really, really important to get the input from your colleagues. So fundamental. Rolling out goals and objectives across the business. Yeah, really important with that, Nicholas, in terms of, I don't know if you know something called the FAIR leadership model, but make sure you're telling people why you're doing it. It's that why and that communication of that that's so fundamental, so that people feel it's a fair decision. More virtual socials, yeah, and hopefully you can get really creative with how you do that. I think, you know, we've done the quizzes. There's so many different opportunities to move on and get experimental there. Designing a questionnaire, how people are feeling to send out. Yeah, Annie, if you want any help with that, I do that quite a lot, so just drop me an email. Simple questions like how you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10 is a very, very powerful one. Yeah, brilliant. So let's start to kind of think about the final piece of this puzzle. Oh, thanks, Sharifa. Yeah, you've got lots of ideas. Fantastic. How do we stay as a community? You know, why is this idea of staying stronger as a community so important? And that's really, it's built on a huge study that we found from Google did this. And they were researching the difference between average performing teams and individuals and the high performing teams. And they said, right, what's the difference between these people who are really meeting their potential and those teams who are the highest performing? And they expected it to be something to do about personality types, right? We all do the personality profiling, all of that stuff. We did all sorts of, you know, research. And is it actually about their qualifications? No, it wasn't about that. What it was about their social networks. So it was about having high quality connections. So really, really important that people knew their connections, they knew their network, they knew the value of those people in that network. And so within that, they were then able to engage in conversations, and those conversations were balanced. They were as good at listening as they were at speaking. And that's something that generally we're not. We're all very much better at speaking because that's what we get education in. We don't get education in listening. And that's really what creates high quality connections, is knowing that we have a support network. Number one, that reduces our stress response, which enables us to access the sort of thinking part of the brain more easily, so that the prefrontal cortex, when our stress response is managed, we can actually think more clearly. Probably most of us know that. So by having and knowing we've got connections and support, that helps that function. When we connect with other people, we get releases of certain chemicals, which again support that. And if we can then communicate effectively, we can keep learning from each other. So part of this is actually to say, what did I achieve? You know, so sorry, this is that's sort of not the right slide. I'm gonna pause on that. This would be the right slide. So this is about having these connections where we actually connect with people and we have meaningful conversations. So we're asking people, we want people to acknowledge what the highlights of their week are. So every time we speak to people, we can ask them what the highlight is. And rather than jump in with your highlight, ask them some more questions. So there's something called active constructive responding, another interesting topic to explore. And this is about how, if we can harness those moments where people talk about highlights and positives, we can actually optimize the impact of those and make people experience greater fulfillment on a day-to-day basis through kind of strengthening neural pathways. Really, really interesting. So ask people what the highlight of the week was. Similar to how Kerry in his performance reviews said, you ask people what's going well. It's that principle, but bring it into every meeting. But don't be scared of the challenges. So ask people, what are the challenges? But when you talk about those challenges, we want to try and focus on, well, that's brilliant. What have you learned? So what strengths have you shown? What have you learned? And what are you going to do differently? So essentially what we're doing here is we're celebrating success as much as we're celebrating failure or challenges or opportunities for growth. And this is why, if we do this as a team, as a community, it starts to get embedded into the culture of your organization. And then people aren't going to hide those small slip-ups. They aren't going to live in that competitive fear sort of culture. They're going to live in this innovative, creative mindset. I've just seen Nicholas has raised his hand. Is that a request to unmute yourself, Nicholas? If you'd like to unmute, then that's fine. If that was just a little momentary slip, then that's fine. No, sorry, you couldn't hear you. Back now. Perfect. So this is just how we need to start to think about this. And again, another book I'd love to recommend, Growth Mindset. High Potential is another one by Sean Aker. Maybe I'll pop these over to Katie and she'll let you know a few books that are worth a read to really help you with embedding this into your everyday. Start to think about this, and you will try to inspire that culture where your team are not only maintaining good levels of mental fitness, but they continue to support that and they continue to become more resilient. And through these connections, that's when we can keep going and we can stay strong as a community. And that growth is also really important for maintaining that sense of meaning within the workplace. We know that change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And we need to do that as leaders, as HR managers, as team members, and as well as, family members, as friends. When you go home tonight, sit around the dinner table, ask people the highlight of the day, ask people what they've learnt today. It's a much more interesting conversation than how was your day. That wraps up kind of my part of what I'm going to talk about. So we've explored this idea of mental fitness, what mental fitness for business is, and how to stay stronger. I do just want you to start to commit to doing something as a result of today, and then we'll move into some Q&A. So I'm going to ask you to share in the chat function what you're going to do as a result of today and who you could ask to support you in that. So thinking about that community, who can you reach out to ask for some support in this process? And I'm going to launch a poll as well. So if you don't want to type in the chat function, you can fill out that poll. Who could you ask to support you with whatever changes you want to make? Just seeing the note from Nicholas, I have some moment now to read it. So recruiting more people to deliver your corporate social responsibility. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Nicholas. And so important. And, supporting the mental health of people is so integrated into that. That's fantastic. Take breaks, make certain the breaks are taken. Yes, Sarah, if you're ever leading a team, can you do that in your meetings as well? Thinking about it with yourself. And as I said, drop me a message and I'll help you with that. Say hi and check in with colleagues that you don't normally speak with. Fantastic, Joe. Yeah. Maybe try that 1 to 10. Very powerful. Review the video to make a task list. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be sending all this out in a follow-up letter afterwards with the link. I actually had a really good question come in earlier, Charlotte, that said, how do you think managing mental health in the workplace differs between big, massive corporate companies where not everyone might speak to each other every day, and also with smaller companies, sort of ranging from 2 upwards to 20, I suppose. And it's probably a question for Carrie as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a very fundamental difference. I think it's probably initially easier in a small environment in some respects, but actually then it's a very much more volatile in the sense that, one person's negativity or mindset can have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
So it is a very different approach, but I think it always comes back to leaders as being really fundamental. You need to make sure your leadership team are not only versed in what they can do to look after themselves. They need to be taking care of themselves. They need to be conscious of how they are embodying the values that they want for that team. And that comes across, doesn't matter how big that company is, it's about how that's happening. It's about having open conversations. I think that's the other thing, which is so important to really think about. I'm not quite sure if I answered your question there, really. Was it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, that's good. I guess, Carrie, how have you found different size teams in your experience?
I think it's a lot easier within a smaller business. It's a lot easier to identify people who are, or easier for leaders to identify people who are struggling a little bit more than when you're in a big corporate, when you're not so on top of each other, if you like. As Charlotte said, that then actually means that if someone isn't feeling great, that ripple effect through the business is a lot more profound than in a larger corporate. But then you can almost be a lot more agile, and you can address it a lot quicker within a smaller business. And I mean, through working with Charlotte and the advice that we've taken, we've actually trained some people internally to become mental health, I can't remember what we actually call them in there.
Yeah.
Mental health first aiders. And so we've got someone who can look out for people internally. If they can see someone that's having a bit of a hard day or struggling or something, it's just an arm around the shoulder, it's a walk outside, it's a cup of coffee, just to try and help understand why they're struggling, and if it's a quick fix that we can do, if it's something a little bit more that we need to be a bit more involved with. But certainly I think that there's a better opportunity within smaller companies to be able to be more proactive in helping people with their headspace.
Yeah. And I think the thing is, in larger companies, every leader needs to have at least some level of those spotting the signs. And to understand, I think there's too much conversation in this space where people go, they only focus on mental health being the ill health, rather than realizing this is actually just your mindset. This is your mindset every day. So we need to be, how can we optimize that mindset as well as looking out for those signals, and that's through sort of motivation and stuff. So yeah.
Really. We've got a couple of questions as well that have come through on our Q&A instead of the chat. So the first one is, what activities can employers get involved in to promote World Mental Health Day? So for anyone that missed it at the beginning, World Mental Health Day is this Saturday on the 10th of October. So I guess it's quite a good opportunity to start getting involved and exercising some of the tips that you've hopefully learned from our webinar today. But yeah, Charlotte and Carrie, have you got any ideas of specific activities that employers could get involved with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, are you right for me to jump in there, Kerry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. So really, really interesting, because I think if you can do something internally that's really internally led, it can be really powerful. And that's simply as just getting people in the business to talk about the topic of mental health. So whether that is asking people to share their experience of mental health, positive, negative, supporting someone else, recovery, whatever it is, maybe it's someone coming and just saying, I've never experienced mental ill health and I really can't understand how hard that must be. Or I learned this statistic this week, I'm really shocked. On the other hand, it could be kind of take it one step back and just say to people, what do you think, what does the term mental health mean to you? And get people to share. And you can do that in lots of different ways. You can do it in meetings, just have a 5-minute moment. You can do it, get one of the companies I work with, they've been getting people to do short videos. So just like on their phone, a 1-minute video, this is what it is. They put it together and they're going to send that out. They can be anonymous blogs, just 100 words, 300 words, whatever it is. Just getting people to share and realize that, yes, everybody in your organization has mental health, whether that's positive mental health, whether that's mental illness, whether that's good mental fitness or not. just get that conversation going through shared stories. And then, you know, you can perhaps make some adjustments during that week. You might want to say, right, well, we want everyone to take their lunch break this week, so we're not going to have any meetings over lunch, if that's something that your company tends to get into. Or, you know, someone was mentioning about this idea of taking breaks. Right, well, we're going to make sure all our meetings this week finish, they're 45 minutes rather than an hour, so everyone can take a 15-minute break. You know, whatever it is, something simple like that, which helps people check in, maybe get people to check in on that 1 to 10 as well, and keep that going. So those are some really simple things, and it's just about getting the conversation going, and share that mental health continuum as well, that axis that I shared.
Thank you.
The only thing I'd add to that is also, if you want to keep it a little bit more anonymous, I mean, Amy's brought up the point there about having quite a junior team, and if you just hire quite a few junior people, or there is more of a junior stance, so they're not used to explaining how they feel quite so openly, that getting everyone to rate their kind of like their mental well-being or how they're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, and just do that on the anonymous poll, that will actually give you a great insight into how the team, the general kind of feeling within the team is. I mean, if it's overwhelmingly negative, then you can address that, and if it's really positive, then you can actually take quite a lot of credit from that from leaders as well. So it's a very quick and easy thing to do that.
Yeah. We've got another one from Harry. He said the natural question to ask at the moment is, how, as a leader, would you identify an issue whilst working remotely? So I guess kind of how would employers, or do you have any tips for employers who are looking to improve mental health in their workplace whilst we're still working remotely?
From my point of view, we've noticed on a couple of occasions just people just not getting involved, whether that be some of our our end of month team socials, or whether they just became a little bit more distant on the teamwork calls that we have through the week. And actually, whilst working remotely, and you are all coming together at set periods of time, probably more than when you're actually in the office all together, just seeing people's level of engagement with that, and anyone who's been a little bit despondent or not asking questions or hasn't been as vocal as they normally would, that is, for me, that's a clear sign that someone's either not engaged with the work that they're doing so much anymore, or that they're just having a bit of a down day or a down week. We actually found that with someone who'd been on holiday, had to cancel 4 holidays in a row. We made him take his 5th holiday, even though we knew he was going to be quarantined on the way back, but then was really struggling with that 2-week quarantine afterwards. We sent him some nice stuff actually through Amazon just to pick him up a little bit, and that was enormously well received, I think. But you can, there are some red flags which you can keep an eye out for.
Yeah, I think that's, it's absolutely right, Kerry. Like the engagement, also just people, if their work performance goes down in any way, making mistakes, missing deadlines, just simple things like that. You can look for subtle things like the hours that they're engaging. You might find that people are suddenly not emailing first thing in the morning, but then they're emailing until 1 and 2 the next morning. Those things are really, really crucial. And not only is it harder to read body language online, but it can be quite exhausting for us, but trying to just be conscious of people's body language. You can tell that if I'm leaning forward like this in a meeting, I'm probably with you, but then if I'm like drifting and not really focusing, or if I'm sitting back, or if there's plates piled up and I've clearly not done the washing up in a couple of weeks, they're all the kind of subtle signs. Good job we don't see your sink, right, Kerry?
Yeah.
But yeah, just it's about being really switched on and not being scared to have that conversation if you've just got a hunch. I think it's too often that we go, I don't want to pry, I don't want to assume. There's nothing wrong with saying, how are you? How are you finding stuff? And that's what we found through this process, is that generally people are actually finding it's a little bit easier to say, I'm not as okay as I'd like to be. So I think it's just really important, just keep checking in. even if you say, well, it's only been a couple of days, but maybe I can just check in and prevent this becoming a problem, because the sooner you can interject, the more you can prevent it.
Yeah, absolutely. Prevention is such a massive thing. So we've got a couple more questions as well. If it's okay with you guys, send in any more questions and we'll keep answering until about 1 o'clock. And then if anyone has any more questions after that, just drop either Charlotte or I an email and we can carry on from there. So we've got one from David who said, what's the difference in your view between mental health and mental well-being? He said that there seems to be little patience for spectrum disorders in this period of focus on mental health.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, David, they're the same thing, really. Like this mental health, that whole continuum, in my view, that's mental health. Whether it's mental illness, whether it's mental fitness, it's our mindset. It's how we're able to engage with life and how we're able to engage with other people and all of those things. So I see them being very much the same. I think it's so complex, the spectrum disorders. There's so many disorders, I think equally, and personality disorders aren't very, they're not understood well. There's so many areas that it's so nuanced. And the difficulty here is that the research really, we've been looking at physical health for years. And the research into mental health, has really only evolved over the last sort of 70 years. And prior to that, it was just like, oh, they're not like us. Let's push them out of society, essentially. So there is a long way to go in terms of our understanding of spectrum disorders, our awareness of them, how they integrate. So yes, I totally support what you're saying there. And there's definitely a long way to go with the whole mental health conversation. I still think there's too many people that still associate mental health with being ill health. So yeah, hopefully it's just a journey that we can all work as a community on through these small changes. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Kerry. I'd be interested to, any thoughts you've got.
You're definitely the more experienced to talk about that one than me.
Oh, well, our next one might be slightly more aimed at you, Carrie. So Fergus asked, how do you get feedback on your management from your employees? Should it be anonymous? And if so, how do you deal with individual issues?
Yeah, I think you need to brace yourself and just go anonymous for the management feedback. That's the only way you'll actually get really clear and honest feedback with it all. Otherwise, people will probably just tell you exactly what they think they should be telling you or what they think you want to hear. So definitely go anonymous on that. You can do, we've done a few surveys through the company. So that's relatively easy to do too. And if so, how do you deal with individual issues? You need to be, I think people need to be prepared to come and tell you that they are suffering a little bit, or they do have a bit of a problem, or, it's identifying those red flags in people's behavior to then be able to go be proactive with it a little bit. But you can't really force the issue if people don't want to talk about it. It's difficult to get them to open up, particularly, kind of over computer and remotely as well. But again, Charlotte's got some, the information that Charlotte can share with you and the training that she can give people within your company about how to deal with it is actually, that actually takes the pressure off management. And so people don't feel like they're being dealt with by their management for their mental health issues. And I think that's actually quite important too.
Thank you. And we've got another point from Nicholas. He said, one of the key things from my point of view is removing stress. That is a good one. And he's given a book recommendation as well. So thank you very much for sending that in. If anyone else has any recommendations, it'd be really good to get a conversation going there and share around. I think that's, I don't know if you agree, Charlotte, quite important to share advice and tips that everyone has.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Really, really powerful. It's that community thing again. We're only strong if we stay connected. And much as we've been talking about this concept of social isolation that we're in, it's physical distancing, but we're still doing this because of that social connection and the community that we care about around us. So yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. So I think that looks like that's everything from the questions, but if anyone does have any, our contact details will be at the end of this webinar and they'll be sent out to you via email. So if there's absolutely anything, just let us know. And thank you so much, Charlotte, for hosting the session. It's been brilliant to have you, and thank you as well, Carrie, for joining in as well, and both of you for sharing your advice with everyone.